Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another live episode of The Breakdown. It is February 8th, 2026. Cross that out on this thing here because that's the wrong month entirely. We're doing another Alberta Politics Roundup. I'm your host, Nate Pike. We have so much to talk about, but we're going to start with something a little bit whimsical, a little bit more on the fun side, because oh boy, do we have some things that we need to talk about. But to start with, to have a little bit of fun, we got to talk about somebody we haven't talked about in a while. It's been a minute since his name showed up on the breakdown scripts. So let's talk about Jason Kenney for a second. This is so fun and so silly and so dumb. All at the same time, we thought this had to be the show opener for sure. So going back to January 31st in the run-up to the Federal Conservative Party of Canada's AGM big meetup in Calgary, there was some things that were going on, and of course there were a couple of there's a little bit of I believe the kids call it shit posting that was happening in the run-up to the thing, and there was a statement that was issued, it's right here, by three Liberal MPs, three Liberal MPs. And this is where it gets kind of like, it's really kind of like, I don't know why anyone would take the bait on something this silly unless they were a somewhat acerbic podcast. But somebody did take the bait. We're going to get into the statement first because the statement said yesterday, Conservatives doubled down on Pierre Poilievre and the divisive American-style politics Canadians rejected last spring. In Pierre Poilievre's 20 years as a politician, he has delivered little for Canadians but empty slogans, reckless stunts, and pandering to the far right. All at this crucial time for our country, Pierre Poilievre is still the wrong choice. In a shocking turn, the three Liberal MPs did not like Pierre Poilievre getting a re-up on his leadership of the Conservative Party of Canada. Some people who are speculating maybe a certain Kenney of the Jasons was also not happy because he's trying to rebuild his profile. There's been a lot of people speculating that perhaps it was because he was waiting for the downfall of Mr. Poilievre so he could swoop in and run for the leadership of the Conservative Party of Canada. Yeah, it's neither here nor there. But he took issue. He had problems with the statement from three Liberal MPs, because that's going to really influence the opinions of the Liberal MPs are definitely going to influence the Conservative Party of Canada, especially three of them. That'll be a big deal breaker. Anyways, Jason Kenney came out shameful. Liberals smearing Canadian Conservatives as far right is like Trump smearing anti-ICE protesters as terrorists. It's not. First of all, no. Not at all. Not the same thing. Worst analogous effort ever. Both are vile smears that empty those powerful words of their meaning. We need to actually need to be able to stigmatize and call out the far right and terrorism. Recklessly throwing around that kind of language to characterize their Democratic adversaries is corrosive and irresponsible. Jason Kenney. The same guy who talked about Greenpeace being taken by Russians and imprisoned illegally as being instructive would like to bring the temperature down. Far right is a term historically associated with Nazis/fascists. One of the biggest applause lines in at Pierre Poilievre's speech last night was his full-throated condemnation of anti-Semitism. Spontaneous standing ovation from the crowd. If that's far right, then nothing is far right. So there's a lot to unpack here. First of all, the ICE, I would not like the Donald Trump thing's just dumb. It's dumb. It's a dumb analogy. It doesn't work. It's clunky and it's inaccurate. And it's you could tell that nobody's writing his columns for him anymore. And there's also a problem with that logic that he threw out in there, because if you're going to say that anybody who says anti-Semitism is bad, and to be clear, anti-Semitism is bad, But if you're going to say anybody who says anti-Semitism is bad can't possibly be far right, then we have some problems. Because as soon as you say that, you're kind of giving a ticket to anyone in the far right who are like, oh, no, I'm against anti-Semitism, therefore I can't possibly be far right. I mean, Donald Trump is on the record as being against anti-Semitism, but he's a polarizing figure. Maybe there's some questions as to whether or not Donald Trump is far right. I mean, I don't think there should be, but for some people there might be. So we decided to. We used to enjoy playing around with the Jason Kenney, having a little bit of fun with him. We had a puppet and everything. So we decided let's see if we can poke some logical holes in Mr. Kenney's argument. So we responded with, as long as you condemn anti-Semitism, you can't be fascist is a heck of a take. Here's another quote. We are ready to cooperate in everything connected to the war against anti-Semitism. Who said it? Viktor Orban. And then we quote tweeted Jason Kenney, which he apparently did not like. Where did we get the quote from? We got that quote from a German news organization called DW. This was back in, I believe it was 2019, where Viktor Orban swore on a stack of books that he was going to cooperate with Israel fully to fight anti-Semitism. Now, DW is not a extremist or fringe news organization. They're kind of the equivalent of the CBC. Now, there's probably going to be some people who are going to be, oh, but the CBC is whatever. I don't know why you're watching this show if that's the kind of mentality you have, because I think the CBC is just like, it's got its flaws, but it's very, very important. And that's my thing. So who's Viktor Orban? Why did we choose that particular example to maybe aggravate the former premier of Alberta just a little bit? Well, let's take a look. And in order to do that, we have to first sort of get some additional context as to what our sources are. So we're going to go with the little organization called the Human Rights Research Center, because they put this little article up. Now, there's going to be some people who say, the February 2019, that's a little bit old. Maybe we need newer information. Cool. This is from March 11th of 2025. And what does the Human Rights Research Center have to say about Mr. Orban? Today's lesson in geopolitics from the breakdown. So to start with, who is Viktor Orban? Happy to answer that question. After Viktor Orban briefly served in 1998 before being defeated twice, he rose to power again in 2010, taking a foothold as an anti-communist leader and setting up his Christian nationalist party, Fidesz. Claiming to be a champion of democracy, realizing he had to, quote, turn his back on liberalism to gain power, he has now become an authoritarian leader, aligning with Russia, who he once criticized so strongly and who is now an important trade partner with Hungary. Orban made it challenging for Fidesz to lose elections using corruption. Fidesz won 2/3 of parliament seats in Hungary's last two elections, despite not winning a majority of votes. He's also made it difficult for citizens to dissent, using censorship and cracking down on protests. Election fraud, vote tampering, constitution rewriting, and seizing state resources are key components of this corruption. Orban also seized power over the courts and issued a state of emergency, creating more leeway for him to quickly pass executive action. Orban has also gained power using false xenophobic narratives that cater to white supremacists, including the eugenist Great Replacement theory, stating that white people will be replaced by other races and must therefore reproduce in order to avoid replacement. Fidesz has also attacked journalists and criticized while taking control of the media. Many free media outlets are now subject to cyber attacks or accused of being funded by George Soros, a left-wing Hungarian Jewish billionaire who Orban has made an enemy of, or U.S. left-wing interests. So that's Viktor, who appears to be posing in this photo as some sort of Star Wars villain. I don't know. Most reasonable people should be able to come to the agreement that Viktor Orban is in fact far right. That's a pretty safe statement. You can go chat GPT it or your AI model of choice if you're lazy at the researching. That's okay. Not here to judge. Viktor Orban is far right. That is a safe statement. I will commit fully to saying that Viktor Orban is far right. Viktor Orban is also against anti-Semitism. So it appears that being against anti-Semitism is not a get-out-of-jail-free card for being far right. Mr. Kenney did there he is right there, his little Twitter profile with his pinned tweet. And Mr. Kenney did not take kindly, it appears, did not enjoy the fact that we were trying to help him work on his logical reasoning. This plus this does not equal this. Because Jason Kenney has blocked us. After 7 years of the breakdown doing what the breakdown does, Jason Kenney, former premier of Alberta, has finally blocked the breakdown, because we pointed out that you can be both far right and claim to be against anti-Semitism at the same time. Bye, Jason. I mean, it appears that Mr. Poilievre's got a few more years, so you got some free time, I guess. Moving on from there. New little piece of information that's very relevant to Alberta politics and actually is pretty revealing, potentially, depending on how you choose to interpret it. We finally got the Legislative Assembly of Alberta calendar. We know the almost slightly more than a dozen weeks that MLAs and ministers will be sitting in the legislature, which is low, to be clear. COVID was a bit of an outlier. It kind of pushed down the numbers. But since Danielle SMith has been into power, she has done a very, very, very good job of going with less than the regular average of weeks working in the legislature. Now, pros and cons. Some people might say that means that she can do less legislating. Cons. There's a lot of MLAs who were in the legislature. We talked to Rocky Pancholi on a recent episode, who would say the steps that the UCP have taken to limit debate means that they can get an awful lot done without needing very much time. And they do love to travel, which makes it hard to sit in the legislature. It's just got the really nice carpet and the comfy chairs and everything, but it's just not first class flight to the UAE. It's just not. So obviously we have to pare down. But there are some interesting things to be taken out of the legislative calendar. The first thing is the first sitting is from February, goes through March, goes through April, a little bit of May. Now, that's going to be a fascinating sitting because there's actually a lot of things coming down the pipe. There's no question that there's a budget that's coming up. There's also no doubt, and the government has certainly been doing their good hard work of making sure that people are aware, this budget's going to be something of a shit show. It's not good. There's going to be, we're going to be short a lot of money. So that's not great, especially given the amount of spending that Danielle SMith and the UCP have been doing of late. But it also means with the budget coming out, there's a very, very good likelihood that it's going to be the season of dead cats raining from the sky. For anybody who's not familiar, throwing a dead cat on the table is a euphemism for doing something really shocking and bad in order to try to distract everybody from what just happened. There's been lots of things that Danielle SMith has alluded to that she's looking at pursuing in her legislative session. We're going to talk about some of those. And there's some big changes that are rumored to be coming to education. In particular, what requirements are going to have to happen in order for a person to become a certified teacher. There's rumors that there's going to be some pretty significant legislative changes coming about that. Danielle SMith has been soft-pedaling a press conference that she's allegedly having later this week with Demetrius Nicolaides and a few other folks. So we'll see what we see there. But there's another piece that's really interesting that just wanted to highlight, because the first block, that March, April, May, the Budgets and Dead Cats session, that is one of only two blocks of sittings. The other one is in October. Or rather, I should say it starts in very late October. Now, why is this particularly interesting? Well, Danny's been very, very clear. We're going to have some referendums. And so a reasonable person could look at this legislative schedule and go, we're going to have those referendums in September, October, because then we're going to come in for the last chunk of the year. And that's where we're going to see a lot of legislative questions being addressed about those referendums. And we're going to get into some of those referendum pieces in just a little bit, because there's a whole lot going on in those areas. But before we do, we got a couple of other, not small, let's call them quick, some quick stories that we got to talk about, because there's some other things that are going on. To start with, we're going to talk about this story from Ewan Thompson, who is the editor-in-chief, I guess, of Drug Data Decoded. We've had Ewan on the show a bunch of times before, and he had a conversation with Mike Parker from the HSA union association. And this is where I probably have to do my full disclosure. I work as a paramedic, and I'm a member of the HSAA. That doesn't mean that I won't talk shit about Mike if need be, but that's not what needs to happen today. So there we go. I do have my biases, and again, I just like to disclose them every time before we get into one of these stories, because I think that's important, disclosing your conflicts of interest. The Drug Data Decoded story. The reporting that Ewan did, revealed that the Alberta government has been undercounting the ambulances sent to drug poisonings by as much as 89%. We're not talking 10%. We're not talking 50%. We're talking almost all of the percents. You only have 11 more percents to go and you get 100%. They've been undercounting the ambulances sent to drug poisonings by as much as 89%. By the government's accountings, 1 in 36 ambulances in 2023 went to a drug poisoning. But the health service record shows 1 in 6, and in 2025 exceeded 2023 in drug toxicity volume. Now, Mr. Parker, in the article, which you should definitely go and read, talks about the fact that it's really, really hard to solve a problem when you haven't accurately defined what the problem is. So identifying how significant, how much first responder resources are required to deal with the overdoses that are happening in the community, it's very hard to resource that appropriately, which he then talks about having a lot to do with burnout of, among other things, professions, paramedics. So it's a really good article. I strongly recommend you read it. But it's really interesting that this comes up at a time where the province of Alberta is continuing to plow ahead with their commitment to closing all of the supervised consumption sites in the province. The big one that has been getting a lot of attention has been the supervised consumption site in Calgary. It's located at the Sheldon Schumer, and it has saved countless lives. But ideologically, the UCP just don't like it. The UCP plan is to get rid of all of the supervised consumption sites and offer treatment on demand. So let's say that you're in the throes of addiction and you're in no way ready to access help. The relationships haven't been built. The trust hasn't been built. You're not ready to address that trauma because you don't feel like the appropriate safety nets are in place. All of those things. There's nowhere to go to use the drugs that you're going to use anyways because you're in active addiction, where there will be somebody to revive you. And this is a really big problem because one of the big conversations that has come up is the idea of social disorder. And that is a very broad term. I want to be very clear. It is not, nobody likes to see people in the throes of addiction. Nobody likes to see people who are actively, profoundly, I would hope, actively, profoundly high. Everybody's seen the people that are hunched over, that are slumped over. Everybody experiences, I imagine, I would like to think, a little bit of that concern of, are they okay? Should I be doing something? I don't like that this is happening in my neighborhood. What can I do? Now, the reality is you can go to lots of different places in downtown that have absolutely nothing to do with the Sheldon Schumer, and you will see large groups of people using together. They are creating, in effect, a not medically supervised consumption site, because they are at least trying to watch out for each other. Having, though, a medically supervised consumption site where people can go and use, they can get clean supplies so that we're not seeing people sharing needles and all of the health concerns that come from that. Having a place where people can go where they can safely use, be resuscitated if need be, and have those relationships built. This is such a cornerstone of getting people who are on the fringes, if you will, access to services. And I mentioned him many, many times on the show. I'm probably going to continue. I'm excited for having him back on the show in just a little bit. But Guy Felicella speaks to this very, very effectively, because he talks about the fact that for him, despite being on the street for something like 13 years and using hard drugs for the vast majority of that time, it was the relationships that were built with the outreach workers that allowed him to get to a place where he was able to access treatment and actually achieve sobriety. And he's turned his life around and is doing absolutely amazing things with it and doing a lot of good for a lot of people. So to simply say, you know what, here's what we're going to do. If you're using drugs, your choices are you can choose treatment or go fuck yourself, is a hell of a bold choice. And it really, really speaks to the fact that the priority is not helping people. It's not using evidence-based data to help people, to reach people, to build those relationships, to help heal the trauma that invariably drive people to use these drugs in these sorts of circumstances anyways. It's not about any of that. It's about, I don't like drug users, so either they can get into treatment or they can die. And that's the reality. And it's a profoundly tragic reality. And even worse is the reality has been manufactured based on a lot of mis and disinformation. One of the things that you'll hear is crime. Oh, crime. The crime is so bad. But that begs the question, what are we categorizing as crime? Because we're talking about somebody using drugs. Yes, technically, that's a crime. Is it a crime against anybody around them? There's probably some questions of severity that should be maybe discussed out a little bit, because there's no question, going back 20 years, if somebody was hanging outside back of a pub having a joint, they were committing a crime. Is it on the same order as somebody running down the street with an automatic weapon gunning people down? I think most reasonable people would say no. But crime, the broad term crime, has gone up, they say, around some of these facilities, and the Sheldon Schumer often gets singled out as an example, except it's not quite true. Last year, then city councilor Courtney Walcott, this is from an article in Post Media, the Beltlines area councilor, the guy who's responsible for that area of the city at the time, Courtney Walcott disputes the notion that SafeWorks has brought an increase in crime to the area, a claim made by Ward 3 councilor, I want to make sure I read this right, Dan McLean on Wednesday. Walcott shared area crime statistics Wednesday that outlined the number of calls to the Calgary Police Service in the Beltline from 2018 to 2024 during the months of July, August, and September. The figures show calls related to disorder, including open-air drug use, homeless individuals, and loitering, were down slightly this summer compared to the same time frame in 2023, 2021, 2020, and 2019. So, the crime actually goes down. Now, there's a lot of other variables that contribute to the crime. But when we're talking about the horrifying crimes of open-air drug use, homeless individuals, and loitering, having the only option be you can accept treatment or not does not meet the spectrum of individuals that need to access services, that need to build those relationships. Nonetheless, the province is going to be continuing to go ahead with their efforts to close the Sheldon Schumer supervised consumption site this year, because they believe in a treatment-only model. And if you're not ready for it, I guess it won't be needles that we're cleaning up off the streets. Moving on from there. We got to talk about the Alberta Tories for a second. This is a weird one. We spent some time at the end of last year talking about these guys because there's so much going on with the little party that doesn't seem to be getting any traction, let's say. And there's a lot of different complex reasons for that. The first thing that we got to talk about is this piece here. So back in July, we saw Peter Guthrie attending Stampede events wearing the PC Alberta t-shirt. Shortly after, might have even been during Stampede. Yeah, it was the July 10th. The two MLAs that had been kicked out of the UCP caucus, which would be Peter Guthrie and Scott Sinclair, they announced that they were going to be rebranding, rebuilding, if you will, the Progressive Conservative Party in Alberta. There's a space for it. There's no parties at the time called Progressive Conservative. There were lots of other parties that were using the conservative name. Derek Fildebrandt's Freedom Conservative Party that existed in 2019. It's not an unheard of thing. Well, there's been some developments. It was not very long ago, just on January 29th. Scott Sinclair, co-founder of the Progressive Conservative Alberta Party, that wasn't. We're going to talk about that in a sec. He put out this letter in which he said he's out. Now, he didn't actually say he's out. He just kind of it was one of those, you drift away in the relationship between the Alberta Tories and Scott Sinclair, because he was all in on the PC party for a while there. But on January 29th, he released this letter. Over the past number of weeks, many constituents have reached out to me inquiring whether or not I would be joining any political parties at this time. I appreciate those conversations, and I want to be clear and transparent with the people of Lesser Slave Lake. After careful consideration, I've decided to continue serving as an independent MLA. This decision was not made lightly. It comes from a firm belief that my responsibilities, first and foremost, are to the people of Northern Alberta. Remaining independent allows me to speak plainly, advocate freely, and work constructively with anyone, regardless of political stripe, when it benefits our region. And then he goes on to say a bunch of the other things that you'd expect to see in a letter. Thank you, everybody, for support, lots of communication, all of that kind of good stuff. But Cole's notes is that means that the Alberta Tories, they have one MLA. That's it now. It's not two. The rumors of the floor crossings to the Alberta Tories or the Progressive Conservatives or the Alberta Party or whatever it was at whatever moment in time, those rumors appear to be demonstrably not happening. So there's that. But that's not the only piece of news surrounding the Alberta Tories, kind of, because the former Alberta Party president, not president, sorry, the acting leader, Lindsay Amatea, she has issued a lawsuit, a countersuit against the provincial government. So it gets weird. When Pete Guthrie and Scott Sinclair initially announced that they were going to be doing the PC Alberta Party, the government went, oh, we don't like that at all, because that's supposed to be one of our old names. And despite the fact that we've drifted so wildly from the principles and practices of the Progressive Conservative Party of Alberta, we don't want anybody else using that name. We have goodwill attached to it, was, I believe, the line. And they sued. They said, we're going to sue you if you do this. And then the Alberta Party got involved for reasons, talk to them, where they said, hey, you know what we can do? We can just change our name to the PC Party of Alberta, and we'll have a vote on it. And they chose a couple of names, variations of PC Party of Alberta, and that's what we're going to do. And then the UCP said, we're going to sue you now. And they launched a pretty significant lawsuit against Pete Guthrie, Lindsay Amatea, and Scott Sinclair. Well, Lindsay Amatea is now countersuing the former president from the story. The former president of the Alberta Party has fired a counterclaim against the United Conservative Party seeking $500,000 in damages and the dismissal of a suit alleging trademark infringement. Lindsay Amatea, who left her role with the Alberta Party in late October, she wasn't the president of the Alberta Party, though. She was the acting leader. Curse you, CBC News. After I just finished saying such nice things about you. Filed the counterclaim as well as a statement of defense January 29th, asking the court honestly to penalize these parties for acting in bad faith for weaponizing the court process to bully their way into what they want, she told CBC News. Now, the government responded to the lawsuits that they filed by saying, well, we're just going to literally change the laws, which brings us back to the bill changes that they did, where they literally banned anybody from using the words advantage, communist, conservative, democratic, green, independence, liberal, pro-life, reform, Republican, solidarity, or Wildrose. All of those are no longer allowed to be used for political parties. There was a thing I was talking about earlier. What was it? Something about banning things and trying to stifle discussion and conversation. I can't remember what it was. Maybe it'll come back to me later. Which brings us to one of our two big chunks. I'm just going to sigh loudly and get it out of the way because we've got to talk about. See, here's the thing. I'm going to do a little preamble here. At our live show, the Breakdowns live show in Edmonton, for those of you who were there, this part didn't make it into the audio recording, unfortunately, because we had some technical issues. But there was a moment where one of our audience members was very fired up, very passionate, appreciate it, respect it, loved it. He was very upset. He's a member of a couple of different communities that are being punched down on by the UCP, no question. And I had used the word in that program, authoritarian, to describe the current provincial government. And this gentleman was expressing some frustration that the other panel members had not used the similar vernacular to describe what was going on in the province. And he got pretty fired up. He was advocating for some strong things. It was a spirited discussion. And again, one that I'm very, very, very grateful for. My response to that young man was, I'm saying that because I'm very, very old, not because he was super young. I've spent a week having people point out that I'm old. So we'll call him a young man. My response to that young man was like, look, I get that the UCP is passing a bunch of horrifying laws. We're talking about the book bans in particular at that night. I get that the UCP is passing a lot of laws that are definitely authoritarian. They're definitely a little fashy. But we still have the courts. As long as we have the courts, there is a process, and that process matters. And I 100% believe that. I still do. I'm a little worried, though. And the reason why I'm worried is because there is no question that the UCP, Danielle SMith in particular, are doing everything in their power to delegitimize the courts, as well as to gain greater control over the courts, which are supposed to be arm's length and objective. I don't need to tell you that, though, because there's going to be some people who talk with much more authority than I can coming up in just a minute here. But we got to talk about the timeline here, because it's really important to contextualize. First of all, Danielle SMith rolls out her anti-trans laws. She rolls out her book bans. She rolls out a bunch of other laws that people go, oh, we're going to challenge that in the courts. We are, particularly the anti-trans laws. And there was an injunction that was put into place by a judge who said that if Danielle SMith's anti-trans laws were allowed to go ahead, they would cause real and permanent harm. And that pending the outcome of the court situation, Those laws were not in effect. They could not be in effect because they were going to cause real and permanent harm. Now, these are some of the laws that Danielle Smith ultimately used the notwithstanding clause for. But we got to go all the way back to December of last year for this particular timeline exercise that we're going to do tonight. Because it is in December of last year that we started to really see the ratcheting up of the language of Danielle Smith attacking the courts and attacking judges.
I'm going to try to boil it down to the significant question, and it does relate to the repeated use of what he says, the Constitution's nuclear option to circumvent the courts and override the will of Albertans without legislative debate. He is talking about, of course, the charter challenge.
Well, those are two different things. The will of Albertans is not expressed by a single judge appointed by Justin Trudeau and never faces any kind of recall campaign, never faces any kind of election. That's what we're talking about, is that in a lot of these cases, the people have told us through our consultation, through our elections, the kind of things they want us to do. And then we go and do them, and then the court can override it. And the court, again, most of the judges are appointed by Ottawa, not by us. And why should? I mean, I think it is not synonymous to have an unelected judge. An unelected judge is not synonymous with democracy. Democracy is when elected individuals who have to face the electorate every 4 years make decisions. That's what democracy is. So I think that things are getting a little bit muddled. They're getting. We believe that in the actions that we have taken, particularly when it comes to protecting kids' right to be able to have kids of their own one day, so that they do not make premature decisions to affect their fertility. We believe that girls and women have a right to participate in sport without having to compete against born male athletes. And we believe that parents should have a right to know what's going on with their kids at school. Those are very strong, strongly supported policies, well above 70% of Albertans. So we believe we're the ones being democratic. The court stepped in and wanted to put an injunction on one of those bills. We suspected the other two were coming. And that's part of the reason we use the notwithstanding clause there, is to protect the democratic will of the people.
Now, there's a lot to unpack there. And I'm gonna do my best. A lot of what Danny said was wrong. Having a judiciary that is arm's length is critically important in protecting the rights of people. Because here's the thing. Somebody's asking me, I love it when people do this. Hey, Nate, would you ever consider running for office again? A, no, my family would kill me. And B, because I'm about to say something that if I ever ran for office, I'm sure would be clipped at length. I mean, this is not the first time I've said something like that, but I'm going to say something a little controversial here. It shouldn't be, but it is. Danielle Smith said the will of the people. That's the thing. Here's the thing. The will of the people can be wrong. It can be. The will of the people can be wrong. A majority of people can be wrong about a thing. And when we're talking about human rights, there have to be guardrails in place, like an independent judiciary enforcing and supporting a charter of rights to ensure that minority groups don't have their rights stripped or trampled by the majority, because the majority can be wrong. That's it. That's the whole ballgame. It's called tyranny of the masses, if we want to use the erudite term. But it's a real thing, and it's an established thing, and it's one of the reasons why a charter of rights and freedoms is so critically important, because it's great if you're in the majority. But if we're going to say only the majority get to decide who gets rights and when, history teaches us very, very clearly where that ends up. Cough, Viktor Orban, cough. But the other piece is Danny's little thesis there, that democracy as a functioning institution can only work by the will of the people. Because again, the will of the people can be wrong. One other little piece that I want to tease out of there before we move on to the next phase of Danny's deconstructing the courts and the judiciary, and that is the importance of fertility, the importance of reproduction. There was a period where I was willing to extend a little bit of sympathy, grace, perhaps, for Danny's bias towards protecting fertility. I'm not speaking out of turn here. I've said it before on the show. It's not a secret. Danielle Smith can't have kids. So I can understand how somebody who's dealing with that could really, really value that. It does not excuse taking away other people's rights and inserting yourself into the doctor's offices across the province, to be absolutely clear. But I'm starting to think that maybe there's a few things that are happening that might just be a little bit more Machiavellian than that. But let's get back to the courts, because that first clip was from December 6th, right after Danny rolled out the notwithstanding clause on the anti-trans stuff. We've got Danny doing her end of year with everybody's favorite corporal punisher, Bruce McAllister.
You have used the notwithstanding clause a few times. You've taken a lot of flack for that, and you've also gotten a lot of support. I think about the teacher strike, some of the trans bills. Is it hard to use that legislation, or are you just so determined and so principled that we have to do this?
I never thought that. I remember people used to ask me about that when I first came in, and I couldn't really foresee of a circumstance where I would use the notwithstanding clause. But then I saw that the activists are going after the kids. And it's one thing for a person to make a decision about what their life choices are as an adult, whether it's surgery, whether it's medical intervention, whether it's changing their name. But when you're a 10-year-old child, you're too young to make a decision that might have a permanent impact on your ability to have kids. That's why we knew we had to stop the use of puberty blockers for minors, 15 years of age and younger, stop surgeries until a person has become an adult and understands the consequences of what that means. It also meant that we had to make sure that parents were not going to be separated from what was going on with their kids. We'd heard stories of maybe well-meaning adults referring kids to gender clinics without the parents' knowledge, being called a different name without their parents' knowledge. And that's a devastating thing to do to a child, to separate them from their parents that way, and a devastating thing for parents too. And then the increasing stories that we heard about the danger of born male athletes competing in women and girls sports. We just knew that we might have been a little bit ahead of the conversation, but when the CAS report came out in the United Kingdom, when you see that the Nordic countries, Sweden, Finland, Norway, now New Zealand and the United States are all going down the same pathway as we are, saying, you know what, this medical intervention has not been tested. We don't know what the long-term consequences are. The watchful waiting has been the previous way that you deal with kids who have this kind of gender confusion, and we're going back to that because we just think it's going to preserve all the choices for kids. The reason we had to use a notwithstanding clause in that case was because the court struck down one of our laws. And when you see how long it takes for a final decision to be made in a court, it could take 4 or 5 years. And we just thought the harm that could potentially come to the number of kids in the meantime, we just thought, we know we're on side with where our public is, and that's the role of an elected official. You got to make decisions. The role of the court is to offer their interpretation of it, but too often I think the court is overstepped and not given the proper deference to the legislatures.
See, so what's happening there is Danny's saying that the courts can offer their opinion, but in her belief, the final arbiter of whether or not something is constitutional, whether or not something is legal, should not be the people who have spent their entire professional lives studying and practicing in that field. It should be the former talk show host. Nobody, please, ever trust me with that kind of power. But again, I just sworn myself with the whole tyranny of masses thing, so it's fine. But there's a couple things that I want to address in that clip. The first one is I love Bruce's performative bullshit. So principled, fist in the air, so determined. It's like the preview for a new anime show. Danielle Smith, so principled, so determined. I love it. Puberty blockers don't cause sterility. Let's be clear. There were no surgeries that were being done for anyone under the age of 18 that caused sterility. They were already illegal in Canada. Look, we've got some fear-mongering going on. Not all of the countries that Danielle Smith has referenced have done the things that she's claiming they have done in the ways that they have done them. It's simply not true. She talks about preserving choices for kids. Not preserving the choices, you're taking them away from them and the parents who love them. Let's be clear about that. But we've got a whole bunch of we're doing the fear, we're doing the things that should make people angry, and then we talk about how, gosh, those courts just overstep. This is a communications tactic. But we're not done denigrating the courts with our end of year with Spanky.
The recent ruling by the Supreme Court of Canada in a 5-4 decision that there should be no minimum sentence for anybody possessing child pornography is case in point.
It is. And the thing that is so, really underscores in that case is that it was a 5-4 decision. So when people say, oh, well, the court's decided, well, the court is often split
all 5
itself.
judges appointed by Justin Trudeau.
Precisely. One more reason why we may have to start looking at how we can have more role in appointing judges, particularly in our courts here.
Again, a lot to unpack there. And that clip is only like 20 seconds. But first things first, it's not what the ruling actually said. What the ruling actually said was there were foreseeable circumstances where, let's say, an 18-year-old was dating a 17-year-old and they shared some spicy texts. That 17-year-old would then have to have a minimum sentence, or sorry, the 18-year-old who's in that relationship with that person would then have to have a minimum sentence. It was a small part of the law that the courts said, you need to go back and fix this small part because we can see this happening and it's not great. Should people who are prolific offenders, criminals, absolutely, there should be minimum sentences. But if you have a law that is so blunt that it does not address the reality that in Alberta, people can get married under the age of 16 or under the age of 18, sorry, we have some logistical problems here. So that's what the courts were talking about in that ruling. The courts did not say, hey, everybody, it's a field day. They absolutely didn't. And to misrepresent that is, to me, a particularly craven form of politics. But the other two pieces that are interesting, Danny talks about, hey, you know what? The vote was 5-4. I don't know, Danny. Sounds like a majority. Sounds like a majority vote. Sounds like a group of 9 people exercised their democratic rights. So according to her own philosophy, if she was consistent with it, that should be enough for everybody to just go, whoa, hands off. It was a majority. What are you going to do? But that's not what she's doing here because that's not what's convenient. The other thing that's really important to highlight is what they said about judges at the end. I'm going to play the clip one more time. It's a short clip, but I want you to really focus on the last 5 seconds.
The recent ruling by the Supreme Court of Canada in a 5-4 decision that there should be no minimum sentence for anybody possessing child pornography is case in point.
It is. And the thing that is so, really underscores in that case is that it was a 5-4 decision. So when people say, oh, well, the court's decided, well, the court is often split
all 5
itself.
judges appointed by Justin Trudeau.
Precisely. One more reason why we may have to start looking at how we can have more role in appointing judges, particularly in our courts here.
One more reason why we may have to start looking at how we can have a more active role in appointing the judges. So to be clear, because Danny does not agree with that majority ruling, it was a close majority. I take nothing away from that. But because Danny doesn't agree with the misrepresented version of that majority ruling, not even the actual ruling, she believes that that's one more reason why she should have more say in appointing judges. But it didn't stop there.
Can we please write some provincial rules to tune these judges in and JPs that they can't be releasing people who are a risk to public safety?
I wish I could direct the judges, honestly, Chris. The judges get very, very prickly when you criticize them. But boy, the example that you just raised, they deserve the criticism. We have been pushing at the federal level to change the rules. Got changed by Justin Trudeau on sentencing and bail, and part of what the rules was you had to take into account whether somebody had a bad childhood and had some mitigating factors for why they became a criminal. And release them on that basis. And that doesn't make sense to me. It should be based on the seriousness of the crime. You can work on whatever issues they had in their childhood while they're incarcerated, rather than releasing them to go and cause this kind of havoc. So every single premier has put pressure on the federal government. They did one round of changes. It didn't work. The Carney government did another round of changes in the fall, so I hope that this one does work. I'm not a lawyer, and so I don't know whether we would be able to develop our own bail guidelines. The problem that we have is we only choose our judges at the lower court level. Court of Appeal and King's Bench are chosen by the federal government. And so we, in fact, I just wrote a letter to Mark Carney saying maybe we should look at a way, now that we've got some openings on King's Bench, for us to have a joint process to choose those judges, so that we start choosing judges in Alberta that reflect the values of how we want them to operate here. So I'll let you know how that goes. But that is a very complicated area of law, mostly in the federal realm. We have the power of administration of justice and policing, and we do work to exercise that to the full extent. But I don't think we have the authority to set our own bail conditions.
That's the clip that started off something of a firestorm in Alberta politics. Now, there's two things. Again, it's the ability to hold disparate ideas inside of one's head without experiencing any sort of cognitive dissonance that should be giving people cause for alarm. Because she says, I wish I could direct the judges. Now, that's not a thing that any leader of any functioning democracy should ever say out loud. It's just not. That's not something they should say. She said it. And she said it in the same breath almost as when she said, but I'm not a lawyer. Imagine someone saying, I wish I could tell the surgeons, the brain surgeons, how they should really be doing brain surgery. I have no medical background and know nothing of anatomy and physiology, but I just really wish that I could. When you say it like that, it sounds absolutely unhinged, because it is absolutely unhinged. It's no different for Danielle SMith to say, hey, I'm not a lawyer. I don't know anything about the legal system, but boy, I wish I could direct the judges. And she did write that letter, although it did take both 2.5 weeks for her to finally release it to the public. And it might be because the way that she presented the situation in that exchange was like, hey, I want to see if we can work collaboratively, see if we can work things out with Mark Carney. But in the letter dated January 23rd, 2026, the day before that appearance on Your Province, Your Premier, Danielle SMith unequivocally said the government of Alberta expects that there will be meaningful engagement and collaboration before these judicial positions are filled. Alberta's government will not agree to provide the necessary funding to support any new judicial positions in the province until such engagement and collaboration are provided. So let's be real clear. She wanted to soft pedal the message and not acknowledge the fact that basically what she said is, we have some vacancies in the courts. We have some positions that need to be filled in order for the legal system, which is by many accounts barely running, in order to keep it at the barely running state that it is. It is not running at the state that it should be. People are having to wait way too long. That's a well-established problem. But threatening to cut funding for judges, for the courts, that's not punishing Ottawa. That's punishing Albertans on a variety of different levels and ways. But that triggered a very rare response, because on January 27th, 2026, all three chief justices for the three levels of courts in the province of Alberta issued, here's the thing. Judges don't speak publicly. They don't. It's not a thing that ever happens. And this is something that is well acknowledged by people who are familiar with how the justice system works. A judge will issue a ruling. You won't see them do the interview circuit after the fact saying, and this is why I did it, and let me put some spin on this for you folks. That's simply not something that judges do because they are arm's length. They are required to be objective. So for justices to issue a statement is a really big deal. For any justice to issue a public for immediate release statement is a huge big deal. A very, very rare thing. It is something that should have everybody going, wait, what is happening that this is considered necessary? And if you take a look at what the statement actually says, it is a remedial lesson on how democracy is actually supposed to work. Properly functioning democracy requires 3 separate branches of government that exercise their power and authority independently according to the Constitution. The executive branch makes policy and manages government operations. The legislative branch makes laws. In turn, the judicial branch interprets and applies those laws to disputes brought before the courts. If a party requests it, judges may be required to interpret and apply the Constitution and the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms and make a ruling. The independence of each branch ensures there are checks and balances across the system. It is the foundation of a healthy democracy. Public trust and confidence in our institutions and all 3 branches of government depend on it. It is equally important that each branch respect and support the independence of the others. So let's be clear. We got the executive. That's the premier and executive council and all of that. Then you've got the legislative, and that's the legislative assembly with all of the MLAs. And then you've got the judiciary, which is the judges. And what the judges are saying is, in effect, stay in your own lane. Because when any one member of any of those groups starts to step on the others, that literally erodes the foundations on which any healthy democracy is built. And it's worth noting, currently, Danielle SMith is, in effect, the executive branch. She also leads the legislative branch. She's got 2 of the 3. And so if she starts poking around at the third one, that should give everybody serious pause, and it should be creating a lot of concern, which it very clearly did, because these judges, and these are just like little judges. These are the chief justices for all 3 levels of court in Alberta issued this statement, this remedial civics lesson that apparently the premier of Alberta, certainly Spanky there, and the comms team, the support team, everybody else there needs to read. But it wasn't just the justices. The Canadian Bar Association also issued a letter on February 5th after Danielle SMith publicly released her letter, where they exercised and voiced very, very strong concern. There's 2 paragraphs in particular that I want to read. Alberta already has a strong voice in this process, with representatives on the 7-member committee appointed by CBA Alberta, the Chief Justice of Alberta, the Law Society of Alberta, and the province's Minister of Justice. All committee members are required to abide by a strict code of ethics that prohibits consideration of a candidate's political viewpoints. This composition ensures meaningful provincial input while preserving the judicial independence that is necessary, that is essential to the rule of law. So let's be very clear here. If somebody's going to get recommended to be a judge, it is a requirement that their political background does not play into whether or not they get to be recommended to be a judge or a higher court judge. You hear all of the people, Justin Trudeau appointed the judges. Yeah, because he was the prime minister at the time. He was actually prime minister for a few years. And if we were to say any of the judges that Justin Trudeau's government approved are somehow compromised, and therefore he shouldn't have approved any judges, the legal system would be in a far worse state than it currently is. So as much as Danny and Spanky want to misrepresent the process to suggest that Justin Trudeau handpicked the judges, it's simply not true. There is an administrative process that exists to safeguard against that sort of thing. There's another part of the letter that is really important. The suggestion, we are particularly concerned by your stated intention to withhold funding to support any new judicial positions in the province until your demands are met. While the federal government appoints and pays judges, provincial governments are responsible for the administration of courts, including court infrastructure and support services. Threatening to withhold this funding is not only unconstitutional, it also undermines the administrative autonomy of the courts, which is a core institutional safeguard of judicial independence. This tactic would also create real hardship for Albertans seeking to resolve their legal disputes before the courts and undermine public safety by exacerbating delays in criminal proceedings. And it's the truth. And it's important to realize that until somebody's been convicted, they're not guilty. So on one hand, we also just heard Danielle SMith saying, hey, we should be keeping people in jail. These bail recommendations, they're totally unacceptable. And on the other hand, she's saying, let's do something that is going to make sure that these people do not have timely access to a fair arm's length court process that will determine their guilt or their innocence. But that's still not all, because over 180 lawyers also penned an open letter where they talked about, among other things, the threats to defund the legal system. And let's just take that in again. This is the same Jolly Pirate Nixon group, not the lawyers, the UCP, that lit their hair on fire when people talked about defunding the police, which was a terrible slogan for what it was trying to accomplish. To be clear, also an American slogan, so it doesn't really apply quite so neatly in Canada. They're wanting the same group that were like, oh my gosh, these people are talking about Janice Irwin. She said defund. She was at a defund the police. She was adjacent to a defund the police thing, and we're just going to defund the courts because we're not getting our unconstitutional way. Fortunately, the federal government has basically said, hey, look, we have rules, we have processes.
I think more broadly first, ensuring that we have an independent judiciary is a hallmark of democracy and a key part of the rule of law. At risk of stating the obvious, it's essential that we have a judiciary who's able to make decisions without fear or favor amongst those who have the power to appoint or, in theory, remove a judge from the bench. When you start to look at how you can protect that independence, certainly ensuring that there's not political threats about the resources that are going to be made available to them to do their jobs as part of it. But another part is actually have integrity in the appointment process to begin with.
Which, by all accounts, there is. All of the people, the people who have the most to gain, all of the lawyers, the Bar Association. If there were problems, these would be the people that would know. And they're the ones that are saying there's a process, and the process matters because it creates guardrails that prevent political interference in that third part that is supposed to be independent and not touchable by the executive or the legislative branch. We've seen what's happened in the United States, where the courts have been politicized. And it's extremely important that we do not allow that to happen in Canada, and especially Alberta. Because if Danielle SMith gets her way, if she gets to take over the control of who gets appointed to the courts, that's deeply concerning for a lot of reasons. And I don't want to be a liar. And I really do believe that if Danielle SMith gets control of the courts, if she's able to direct judges, if she's able to choose the judges that she wants and she likes, despite the fact that she's not a lawyer, that should be terrifying to everybody. Because it's all good and well if it's your team that's winning in that moment, but as soon as another team steps up to the plate, those same circumstances of a corrupted system, those can cause real problems. And we're still not done with Danny undermining the legal system, because now we have to talk about the Alberta Civil Liberties Research Center. And this gets a little bit, we're going to go down a bit of a rabbit hole, so if you need to take a break, I mean, we're an hour in, probably got at least another half hour, 45 minutes left. So if you're watching this live, you can't really press pause, but if you're not, then press pause, because we got to talk about the Alberta Civil Liberties Research Center. And first, in order to talk about them, we got to talk about what they do. So the Alberta Civil Liberties Research Center, or ACLRC, from their own website, their mission is to promote respect for civil liberties and human rights in Alberta through research and education to contribute to a more just and inclusive community. They use the word inclusive. Their vision, a well-informed society empowered to advance civil liberties and human rights. The history of the ACLRC. The ACLRC was founded in 1982, shortly after the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms became law by lawyer and activist Sheldon Schumer and Janet Keeping, an articling student who eventually became its first executive director. In its early days, the center assessed research questions about the charter and its impact on Albertans, but with time, its focus expanded to several human rights and civil liberties issues connected not only to the charter, but provincial and international laws. Some of these issues are racism and racial profiling, hate crimes, seniors' rights in Alberta, lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, queer, intersex, asexual, and two-spirited community rights in Alberta, privacy issues, freedom of expression, freedom of movement, policing in Alberta, and laws in a pandemic era. So the ACLRC does a lot of really important work in regards to educating people as to what their rights are, how their rights are supposed to be expressed as a function of the charter, and how that works with the laws that the province creates. And if we take a look at that list that I just read off and we compare it to the legislative agenda that Danielle SMith and the UCP have advanced so far, it becomes pretty clear how Danielle SMith and the UCP would maybe not so much want people being aware of the reality of all of those rights. And that maybe explains why Mickey Amery, who's not that guy in the picture, that guy in the picture is the head of the ACLRC. Mickey Amery just used powers from a recently passed law to veto pretty much the entire budget of the ACLRC. Now, how did this happen? Well, there's a few pieces to it. In order to really get a handle on the mechanisms that were used, back in April, the UCP passed Bill 39. And what Bill 39 did is it gave Mickey Amery the ability to approve or veto any funding commitment or grant agreement that exceeded $250,000, which it turns out is pretty much the entire operating budget for the ACLRC. Now, they did this by going through the Legal Professions Act and requiring that the Alberta Law Foundation, which gets its money from all the money that's put in trust. We did that on the last episode. Go back and listen to it. This part will make more sense. They did that by saying the Alberta Law Foundation is no longer by law allowed to give grants in the way that they have for literally decades. They now have to get Mickey Amery's approval. So Mickey Amery gets to decide who gets their grants and why. And this has caused a lot of problems. The biggest problem that is on the media landscape right now is the fact that Mickey Amery vetoed all of the funding for the ACLRC. In a letter released on February 3rd, 2026, the ACLRC articulated all of the problems. And what's really wild is they were actually approved for this money. In 2025, after a rigorous vetting process, the Alberta Law Foundation, which is the purse holders, approved the center's 2026 grant application for approximately $780,000 in accordance with the factors set out in the Legal Professions Act. However, the Alberta government recently passed legislation requiring any grant by ALF over $250,000 to be approved by the Minister of Justice. The minister decided to override the ALF's board decision and denied our grant application in its entirety. This is bonkers. This is absolutely bonkers. The fact that the Minister of Justice is targeting an organization whose primary job is to educate people how the legal system works, what their rights are, and shutting it down should be giving everybody, should be setting off alarm bells across the province. And it's important to realize that happened on, like I said, that letter was released on February 3rd. One might think, given all of this, Danny might pump the brakes on her attacks on the courts. Yesterday on Your Province, Your Premier, she doubled down.
Let's be very clear about what we've had happen in this country over the last couple of years, that we had a Trudeau government that completely upturned our sentencing guidelines. And as a result, we've had to see bill after bill after bill. We're now in our third bill at the federal level to try to give new guidance to the judges so that they don't do catch and release and get bad guys back out into the community. So we do have a role in to listen to people and to, through the criminal code, proper channels, make sure that we're making those changes. And if you look at what's happening with Bill 14, it looks like it's been approved by both the opposition and it's being advanced by the federal government. And I hope that that will solve some of the problems that we're hearing. But it doesn't negate the fact that there are bilingual requirements that are unfair and stack the deck against Alberta judges. And we do need to be able to have a similar policy to Quebec.
Is withholding funding the best way to effect that change?
Well, you know, it's a negotiating position, of course. I mean, I'd rather get to a conclusion that is amenable to both of us and fair to both our provinces, as well as acknowledging that there's a federal role to play, of course. But I think we want some parity. So we've started the conversation, and hopefully we'll have some success on it.
Will you have any kind of oversight to ensure that judicial appointments remain impartial?
Well, not me. I mean, this is all within the realm of the Justice Minister, who is our Attorney General, and he's the one who is making the ask, and I trust his judgment. I think that he has already demonstrated, because he does KC appointments. There's an established process for that. We do have one member, as I understand it, on the committee, although it's got 3 federal members. It's just asking for some balance, and I think we'd get a more balanced approach when it comes to those appointments. But I wouldn't be involved in that. It would be led by my Attorney General.
Which brings us to this week's episode of Danielle SMith Lies. And I'm going to prove it in like 5 seconds because it's super, super easy. Mickey Amery's the one. He's the one who's making the ask. Danielle Smith wouldn't have any hand in this. It's all Mickey. It's not like Danielle Smith's directing the thing. Let's go back to that letter that was sent to the Right Honorable Mark Carney. Who was it signed by again? Danielle Smith, Honorable Danielle Smith, Premier of Alberta. She CC'd Mickey Amery, and she CC'd Honorable Sean Fraser, Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada. But the arguments came from Danny. So it's ludicrous for Danielle Smith to say on her radio show, whoa, I wouldn't be directing any of this. It's not like I just did, when she literally just did. Mickey Amery is Justice Minister because Danielle Smith allows him to be. And it's become abundantly clear that Danielle Smith's agenda is Danielle Smith's agenda. If Mickey Amery was to do something that Danielle Smith didn't like, or didn't do something that Danielle Smith did like, he could very, very easily be removed from his position with a stroke of the pen. So for Danielle Smith to say, whoa, it's all independent with Mickey Amory is, first of all, that's a stretch you're asking people to believe, especially after you just lied about who it was who made the overture to the federal government and the threats about withholding funding. Because again, it's not Mickey Amory's name on the bottom of that letter. It's Danielle Smith. Moving on from there. We're going to take a little break. We're going to get into the separatism thing, but before we do, there's one other clip that I really, really, really want to play because I think it's important, and it's going to give me the opportunity to do something fun.
My question is, I'm just curious to know. Last week there was a recording of a teacher in Fort Saskatchewan addressing his social studies class, and the recording was posted and reposted by a premier. Scrutinizing that teacher. However, the previous week, there's also a story of a grade 4 student whose life was saved by a bunch of teachers by acting swiftly and saving her life during recess, and yet nothing was mentioned by that. So I'm just curious to know why you were so ready and willing to post and comment on the Fort Saskatchewan teacher, but nothing was mentioned about the teachers that saved the grade 4 life. It just seems like there's a narrative that you were trying to create, and that one was totally avoided. I'm curious to know your rationale behind that.
Well, I think it's no secret that we've been frustrated that kids in school seem to only get one ideological perspective taught to them, particularly in social studies classes. And so we've been on a mission to roll out a new curriculum. We've been on a mission as well to make sure that we're creating an environment where professional associations cannot penalize their various members if they express a view that is contrary to what the dominant view being taught is. And that was an example, I think, of kids in that classroom being exposed to only a one-sided viewpoint. So that's something that we know is very important to Albertans, and it's something that we're going to continue to advocate. Kids need to be able to get both perspectives and be taught critical thinking so that they can come to their own conclusions. And I would just hope that all teachers would hold themselves to that higher standard.
Okay, first of all, in regards to that little rant that Danny did there, that's not true. That was one character, by all accounts. That was one character that teacher does, where he does a caricature of the prototypical far right person. He also apparently does a caricature of the prototypical far left. In a fascinating turn of events, the conservative rage baiting mouthpiece that leaked that highly edited piece of audio did not include the second character, almost as if the context would have nullified the outrage, and that didn't serve their purpose. So weird that. But the question was, why don't you celebrate the awesome things that teachers do? And the caller referenced an event where apparently a group of teachers literally saved a kid's life. We did not edit out the end. At no point in Danielle Smith's answer did she go, hey, you know what? That is awesome. That is absolutely fantastic. At no point did she do that. So I want to. Teachers are amazing. And not only do those teachers who stepped up to apparently, I don't know the details, but based on what the caller said, intervene medically in a way that saved a child's life. Not only is that absolutely amazing, coming from a paramedic here, I'm going to play the paramedic card on this one. I'm speaking only for myself. But coming from a paramedic here, that is absolutely fantastic. That is heroism, and that is bravery, because for people who are normal people who they're teachers, they don't deal with these sorts of medical emergencies on the daily. For them to be able to step up and do that is absolutely fantastic, and it should be celebrated and shouted from the rooftops. But I also do not want to miss the opportunity to highlight the fact that in big ways like that and small, teachers save kids' lives every single day in classrooms across the province. And I'm quite frankly more than a little bit tired of political hacks like Danielle Smith, Bruce McAllister, Rob Anderson, deciding that they're going to take shots at teachers because it's politically expedient using incomplete information. When these people are working in some of the most difficult circumstances, saving kids' lives every single day. They plug kids in with resources. They're literally creating the future minds that are going to be taking care of old people like me in the future. They are the people who have some of the biggest hand, not the only hand. I am not abdicating the role of parenting here or diminishing the role of parents here. But they are some of the people who have the most influence on making sure that kids are able to learn critical thinking and learn the history of our country and other countries and learn how to not repeat the mistakes of history. That is what amazing teachers do every single day across this province. And if Danielle Smith won't say it with her great big microphone, I will happily say it with my much smaller microphone and platform. But I think everybody should. And before we get into the separatism bullshit, I wanted to have a little bit of positivity. But now let's get into the separatism bullshit. Okay. There's this. Let's talk about separatism, because there's this referendum petition that is making the rounds, and we've talked about it on the show before. There's so much misinformation, there's so much disinformation, there's so much lies that are surrounding this thing. A judge has already ruled that the question as asked is unconstitutional. A judge has already ruled that no separation can happen without the consent of First Nations people across the province of Alberta in all of the treaties. And all of the treaties have said, yeah, no, that ain't happening. So this thing should be, if we were dealing in normal times, this thing should be a non-starter. But Danielle Smith and the UCP changed the rules to allow for unconstitutional questions. And they lowered the bar and a bunch of other things. And apparently a bunch of MLAs have signed it, although none of them have the stones to step up and say, yeah, that was me. And Danielle Smith apparently doesn't have the stones to say, I'm going to find out which one of my MLAs violated their oath of office, and I'm going to have me a conversation with them, and I'm going to give you their names. She doesn't have the courage, the strength, the principle, the conviction. She doesn't have to herd her little group of cats, seditionist cats. She doesn't have that available to her, apparently. But we got to talk about the separatist piece. And we're going to start with something that is on its face funny, but is also deeply, deeply alarming. And that brings us to Camrose. This is a petition signing that took place at a gun show in Camrose. And this is Landon, who's 19, who is signing the Alberta Prosperity Project petition to have Alberta separate from Canada, whilst wearing a Team Canada jersey, hoodie, sweatshirt. I'm not sure what it is. He's got the Team Canada logo right there on the shoulder. He's got the maple leaf emblazoned on his chest as he signs the separatist petition. Now, there's a lot of jokes to be made out of this, for sure. And we've definitely made some of them on our socials. But there's a bigger piece that we really need to talk about here, because these are two completely disparate ideas. I mean, I'm speculating here, but it does look like that young Landon, maybe he seems like the kind of guy who'd be doing the hockey a little bit. He seems like that's his vibe. He's wearing the Team Canada hockey sweatshirt. So He's 19. Seems like a hockey player. We'll say that maybe he's a hockey player. Doesn't matter. Regardless, part of his identity is very clearly that Team Canada hockey shtick, because he paid money for that sweater with the giant maple leaf. He's also signing a separatist petition, and he put that on to go sign the separatist petition. Those are two entirely dissonant ideas, and they should be creating a lot of cognitive dissonance, but it doesn't appear to be. And that's where people really need to start to pay attention to what's going on with the separatist movement, because it's not about logic. It's not about reason. It's not about any of those things. It's purely visceral. If you don't believe me, once you're done enjoying the fine content that the breakdown is offering tonight, go look up some exit interviews from Brexit. Go take a look at what the people in England started to say immediately after. Why did you cast your vote yes for Brexit? Watch the moments where these people are experiencing the look. Oh, I done fucked around and found. I'm finding out, because it's very, very real. These are not decisions that are being made logically. These are not decisions that are being made from a sound policy or fact-based area. They're not. And if you don't think that large groups of people are entirely capable of falling victim to purely emotional arguments that are dissonant, they disagree with each other entirely, you should go watch some Brexit stuff, is all I'm saying. But we're going to get into the separatism thing a little bit tonight. And in order to do that, we got to talk about this guy. This is a user submitted photo of, I don't know if it's doctored. It may be. I cannot speak to the authenticity of this photo, but a user, a viewer, a supporter of the show sent it in. I've not seen this photo replicated anywhere else, so perhaps it's just a humorous device. But we got to talk about Jeffrey Rath. And we're going to focus on some very specific things, most of which have to do with what has Jeffrey Rath been promising people for a while. And it turns out that it's a little dynamic.
On Alberta statehood.
Well, there's a group of Albertans that are working together right now to put together a delegation to go to Washington to talk to the Trump administration about Alberta petitioning for U.S. statehood. It's quite evident that we're being governed by idiots in Ottawa who don't understand that we can't afford a trade war with our largest trading partner. And rather than simply apologizing to President Trump for not meeting our NATO commitments and not adequately securing our border, apparently the Trudeau government has decided to declare a trade war and run up trillions of dollars in costs like they did during COVID on a made-up emergency. So there's a number of us in Alberta that have had enough and want to go speak with the Trump administration about the benefits of Alberta joining the United States.
Again, with COVID being a made-up emergency at all, I cannot imagine why one of the fans of the show would have submitted this this photo of Mr. Rath appearing to be wearing some sort of chrome hat. It looks very expensive. I don't know. That clip was from Rachel Parker. Yes, that Rachel Parker in March of 2025. So not even a year ago. And the Alberta Prosperity Project did, with Jeffrey Rath as one of its delegates and no elected authority whatsoever, or official authority for that matter, did go down to the United States. And he did allegedly meet with State Department officials where they did talk about a lot of these different things. Now, Rath has since, because a lot of people were like, whoa, I don't know. Like, I want to separate, but I don't want to join the United States. It's like, I'm not ready for a rebound yet. I just need a little bit of time to be me. For a lot of people, joining the United States is a bit of a non-starter. So Rath has softened that rhetoric. But there's a lot of rhetoric that Rath very recently hasn't softened. And again, it's really easy to listen to Rath and go, well, that's a lot of unmitigated bullshit. But there's a lot of people who listen to him. And this is where understanding that there are people who are able to hold totally disparate ideas in their head without experiencing any sort of dissonance is really, really important.
Can you understand how, on the face of it, Canadians would view, some Canadians outside of the ones that support your cause, who are not necessarily unempathetic to the frustrations expressed by people in this province, but who would view the idea of, people here meeting with a government that has, spoken the way it has about this country as a whole as problematic and seeking money to make this happen.
I understand that there's a lot of Ontarians and people in Quebec that suffer deeply from Trump derangement syndrome, but we're not doing anything untoward. It's absolutely, from our perspective, we're just conducting due diligence on behalf of our fellow Albertans. We're serious professionals. I mean, I've argued cases at the Supreme Court of Canada, for goodness sake. I mean, we take what we're doing very seriously, and obviously the attitude of the United States towards Alberta independence, which incidentally is overwhelmingly enthusiastic, is something that informs our movement going forward. If the United States said, oh God, we can't tolerate that, flies in the face of, the communist New World Order, we'll slap a 300% tariff on Albertans if they leave because we want you to remain resource slaves of the communist government in Ottawa, it would be a totally different conversation. But that's not the case. We're gratified that it's the case. And quite frankly, the Trump administration shows Albertans far more respect than is shown to Albertans by the government in Ottawa. Do you think three of us could get a meeting with Tim Hodgson to talk about the need for a pipeline to the Pacific Northwest so that David Eby can't continue to hold us hostage? Of course not, because they want us to be held hostage. So, so I understand that there are Canadians that are upset, especially in Ontario, that when Alberta leaves, that Ontarians for the first time in their lives are going to have to pay their own bills and pay the bills of the Maritimes that we've been paying for years. I understand that's upsetting to people, but they need to understand that Albertans are done, we're leaving, and there's no more conversation to be had. I know that's upsetting to people.
Do you believe, though, that the motivations of the people you're meeting with or in the Trump administration are altruistic? Like, do you think they want what's good for you and people who support your cause, or do you think that they're trying to leverage this to get the upper hand against the country of Canada as a whole?
I've studied foreign policy at the university level. I have an honors degree in political science and I have an honors degree in law from the London School of Economics. Don't you think that communist Ottawa is leveraging communist China against Alberta? I mean, come on. I mean, we live in the world of realpolitik.
But you don't mind being a pawn in that fight?
We're not a pawn. I mean, we're talking to them about our aspirations and we have our goals and objectives. So, we're not a pawn. We're actually more like a rook or a queen on a chessboard moving forward in the direction that we want to move freely on the board. The pawns are the provincial premiers like Danielle SMith that are being manipulated by Carney and Eby and communist China to do their globalist bidding, as far as I'm concerned.
There's so much to unpack there. And I'm not going to, because any reasonable person should be able to listen to that tirade and go, wow, that was a lot of bullshit. Because it was a lot of bullshit. But here's where it's dangerous. You only need to believe a small part of that. You only need to want to believe one little thing that he said in there. And that's enough. And here's the problem that we're navigating as a province and a country right now. COVID radicalized a lot of people. That's just the reality. COVID was too big for people to grasp. It was a deeply traumatic event for everybody, whether or not you were one of the people who wore your N95 everywhere you went, you practiced hand hygiene and you did all of those things, or you threw on a yellow vest and you did your best to block traffic on 17th Avenue in Calgary, or worse, you went out to the Ottawa in a big truck and set up bouncy castles because you're behaving like children. It was difficult for everybody. And some people didn't come out of it all that well. History is littered with examples of major world events followed by periods of radicalization. It's just the reality. And people like Wrath have, with their bullshit fountains, have the ability to find people who are looking for an explanation, looking for meaning, looking for someone to blame, and offer them a buffet table of bullshit. Which is the answer that you would like to believe the most, to make things make sense for you again? Who can I offer you on the blame buffet? Danielle Smith does it too. She's not quite as committed to the constant refreshing of the bullshit buffet as Mr. Rath is, but the whole chemtrails thing, the whole misrepresenting gender affirming care, all of it. Danielle Smith loves to offer up the bullshit buffet as well. She just doesn't have it quite as concentrated, quite as porcine as Mr. Rath offers up his bullshit. But there are people who fall into that trap. And it's really important to understand that, because those are the people that can hold two totally opposing ideas in their head and just be okay with it. Now, there's another piece that we're going to work our way into here. And in order to do that, I need to read a bit of a definition. From Cambridge Dictionary, a traitor is an individual who violates trust or allegiance, acting against a country, group, or person, often by aiding an enemy or breaking a pledge. Synonyms include betrayer, backstabber, and defector. It is a term of severe condemnation. Traitor, to be treasonous, is both a colloquial word and a legal definition. I would make the argument, humbly, that if you're having to parse, well, what we're doing doesn't meet the literal legal definition of the criminal code of what treason is or what a traitor is. If that's the ground that you've had to retreat to get away from the definition that I just read, you're a traitor. You maybe can't be convicted of it, but I would happily make the argument that Mr. Rath going down to the United States initially to try to convince the United States to take over the province of Alberta, to have Alberta join. You heard him, his own words, back in March of 2025, speaking to Rachel Parker. That's treason. That makes him, in my opinion, a traitor. And the people who went down with him, same thing. And you know what's interesting? It turns out I'm not alone in that assessment.
I'd like to just take and pause a moment. I read an article last night in the Financial Times about a group of people from Alberta, I won't describe them as Albertans, who went to the White House seeking the assistance of the United States to break up our country. Now, I understand the desire to hold a referendum, to talk about the issues you want to talk about in Canada. We got free speech, that's important. But to go to a foreign country and to ask for assistance in breaking up Canada, there's an old-fashioned word for that, and that word is treason. It is completely inappropriate to seek to weaken Canada, to seek to go and ask for assistance to break up this country from a foreign power. And with respect, a president who has not been particularly respectful of Canada's sovereignty. I'm going to be raising that issue at this table. I think that while we can respect the right of any Canadian to express themselves, to vote in a referendum, I think we need to draw the line at people seeking the assistance of foreign countries to break up this beautiful land of ours that our forefathers, our foremothers, our parents, our grandparents fought for. There is a line. And especially at this time when all Canadians have to pull together, I think we can speak as one voice about conduct like that.
That was David Eby at the First Minister's meeting on January 29th, 2026. I also want to throw in a little something here for all of the, but he changed his mind, Jeffrey did. He said he wasn't going to make it Alberta join the United States anymore. Okay, cool. What he is still trying to do is get the United States to offer a $500 billion line of credit using Alberta's natural resources to secure that $500 billion line of credit. So by Mr. Eby's definition, and by my definition as well, that continues to be Treason, because you're still trying to enlist the power and assistance of a foreign country to break up the one that you're currently in. It's that simple. And the fact that there are people who are like, oh, I don't know if we should call it treason because it's not the criminal code definition. It's treason. It is. Mr. Eby got a little bit of heat. The conservatives, they got very, very upset because how dare you just call someone who's engaging in treason treasonous? How dare you do that? But he doubled down later on in the day.
You know, this is a country my grandparents fought for, that many people before them helped to build. It's made up of First Nations who've been here since time immemorial, as well as immigrants who just got off the airplane today with hearts full of hope of their new adopted country. This is a country we have to fight for. And there are lots of people who would like to take it from us. We need to express in this moment, especially when the country faces such a profound threat, we need to express that we will fight for this country, that we'll stand up for it, and that those who don't wish to, those who would solicit a foreign government to try to come in and take over our country or break it up, that's not part of our vision for Canada. That's not Canadian conduct, and in fact, that is, I described it as an old-fashioned word because we haven't had to use it for a long time. In my opinion, that is treasonous activity, and it needs to be called out. It needs to be stopped. Now, I'm not talking about debates that we have inside the country among Canadians about how we order ourselves, our relationships between the federal government and the provinces, referenda that might be held. I'm talking about crossing the border, soliciting the assistance of a foreign government to break up this country, and I don't think we should stand for it.
Premier Smith, I think it goes automatically.
Oh, it goes on automatically when I speak? It's working? Oh, okay. It works.
We're going to play the answer. Don't worry. It is an important delineation. Nobody is arguing that Confederation is perfect. And I would be among the first to dismiss anyone who said Canada in its current incarnation is perfect. There are no flaws. There very much are. How we choose to have that conversation, that is one thing entirely. Now, I will admit, I experience a great deal of frustration when confronted with people who are espousing separatist rhetoric, because I do find it disappointing is the word that I will use. Would I apply the same label of treason to those people who are so frustrated and have been led to that place by political leaders like Danielle SMith, who literally, while she was a broadcaster, was redrawing the maps of Western Canada, trying to get herself port access, and putting that out on her social media to her considerable audience? Would I be? I can understand how people can get to that place. I think it's sad. I think it's a failure of leadership on a variety of fronts, but it is a different beast than to cross the border and to solicit support from foreign governments. Now, what did Danny have to say?
I've always been clear that me and our United Conservative Caucus are supportive of a strong and sovereign Alberta within a united Canada. That is one of the bills that we passed when I first came in. But I think we also have to be realistic that 10 years under Justin Trudeau's government, our province was relentlessly attacked. Our economy was relentlessly attacked, not only for our economy, but our provincial rights and also our personal freedoms and our way of life. And so when you look at the polls, they suggest as many as 30% of Albertans have lost hope. That's about 1 million people. And I'm not going to demonize or marginalize a million of my fellow citizens when they've got legitimate grievances. What we need to do is we need to give Albertans hope. We need to show them, not just tell them, not just words, but with actions, that Canada can work. And that's what I've been doing. That's why I signed an agreement with the Prime Minister in November so that we could work in common cause on correcting some of the mistakes, I would say, of the Trudeau government. And it's why we participate in these kinds of First Ministers' conferences, so that we can find the things that we agree on and work together for that, for the betterment of the country. And I think this is a very powerful table that has been able to do that for the last 3 years that I've been on it. And I'm honored and delighted to be here.
Now, Danny's doing some things there. We open with, I don't want to condemn. Alberta was attacked for 10 years, 10 whole years. We were just under relentless, nonstop assault by the federal government. Look, they went and bought us that pipeline and everything. It is that disingenuous framing that people fall prey to. It's that bullshit. That is Danny's little mini bullshit banquet. And by no means am I saying that Trudeau was a perfect prime minister, or that he did not have many flaws, or that he did not have many policy missteps, because he absolutely did. But if we're going to talk about it, then we should talk about it. If not for the financial supports that were brought forward by the federal government during COVID, hundreds of thousands of Albertans would have lost their homes. They wouldn't have been able to feed their families. That's just the reality. There were bad things that the Trudeau Liberals did, but there were good things too. And it was not a relentless assault in the way that Danny frames it. And by framing that way, she legitimizes that perception. And it's really important to understand that piece. But the other thing that's important to take out of that little clip there is that she wants to see the Canada show us that it can work. I want my way. I want everything that I ask for, is the subtext. The subtext of that. Even if, though, we are to say that there are 1 million Albertans, I think that's a very generous number, for the record. There are 1 million Albertans who are flirting with the idea of separatism, or separatist curious, even if we're to say that. To call the people who cross the borders to elicit the support of a foreign government traitors is not. I don't believe, and I would hope any reasonable person wouldn't believe, that 1 million Albertans have crossed the border to meet with the U.S. State Department to try to get financial funding or to be a part of the United States. I don't believe that that's happened. I'm sorry, I just don't. It's baffling to me that Danielle SMith will lump in the people who are actively doing that with the people who have separatism curiosity. But it's also interesting that Danny talks about how the United Conservative Party, the caucus, they're united around the language of a sovereign Alberta within a united Canada, which is still some separatist flirty language, to be sure. But particularly when the current president of the United Conservative Party campaigned on, well, you never know.
Now, I'm going to commit to this. If an independence referendum takes place, and if it passes that Alberta wants to leave Canada by 50% plus one, preferably with 60%, would make it a whole lot easier and a whole lot more clear cut. But even at 50% plus one, I will convene the provincial board of directors to say, we need to have a special general meeting, and we need to have a discussion about a question that we want to put to our UCP members that will ultimately say, okay, UCP members, do you want to be an independence party or don't you? And this won't be decided at an AGM, and it won't be decided at a special general meeting that's in person. It'll be decided by ballot boxes that get set up in every one of our 87 constituencies across the province, or 89 if that's where we're at when this happens, where every member of our party will be able to mark a paper ballot, stuff it in a ballot box, and have a say on whether our party becomes an independence party or not. And that is what I commit to.
And he was elected as party president, having said that before the vote. So it's a little disingenuous for Danny to say, hey, everybody's on board with Team Canada in my caucus, especially when, as I said earlier, allegedly there are multiple MLAs who have signed the Alberta Prosperity Project Separatist petition. And Danny doesn't have the stones to go herd the cats to find out who's who in the zoo. But when your party president is like, hey, you know what? If if we get 50 plus 1, then I will, as party president, initiate a question that will allow the UCP to potentially transition into a separatist party. Smith was asked about the demonizing piece again, though, at that First Minister's meeting.
Premier Smith, Premier Ford called on you this morning to denounce the separatist movement. I understand you said you don't want to demonize anyone, but they are seeking the help of the United States government. So what's your response to that? And Prime Minister, if you could please answer the question.
Well, I would expect that the U.S. administration would respect Canadian sovereignty and that they would confine their discussion about Alberta's democratic process to Albertans and to Canadians. And I will raise that with my delegate in Washington so he can raise it with members of the administration. And I will raise it with my delegate in Ottawa so he can raise it with the U.S. ambassador.
I fully associate myself with Premier Smith's comments just then. We expect the U.S. administration to respect Canadian sovereignty. I'm always clear in my conversation with President Trump to that effect, and then move on to what we can do together. Thank you.
But see, that's more bullshit buffet. Because if you listen to what Danny actually said, she didn't say, I think the Trump administration should only be talking to duly elected officials and the appropriate people who are in positions in government to speak for the province who have been chosen by the people of Canada and Alberta to speak for the province. What she said was, I think they should confine their discussions to Albertans and Canadians. And you have to know that when Jeff Rath heard those words, he went, see, it's cool because I'm an Albertan. And when all of the separatists heard those words, they went, yeah, it's cool because Jeff Rath's an Albertan and Danny says it's okay. Smith doubled down on the not wanting to demonize. And again, to my knowledge, David Eby did a very clear job of delineating the difference between I am angry at Canada and I'm toying with separatism. I think a referendum is worthwhile because I'm that angry. I would argue again that anger is grossly misplaced, but there's a difference between the 1 million, if it's that high, Albertans who feel that way and the people who are literally crossing the border to enlist the support of the United States. But Danielle Smith, she can't or she doesn't want to. That's an important question. Make that distinction.
Premier Ford said you should denounce it, and you did not do that.
Well, you know, there's a lot of hurt people here. I mean, when I look at the movement, I see as 30% or more of Albertans have given up on the country. That's distressing, and that is a sign, I think, of a loss of hope. And it's my job to restore hope. But I'm not going to.
Why can't you say?
I'm not going to demonize a million.
Not demonize them, but why can't you say this isn't the path
a million
forward?
Albertans. I just feel like it's my job to allow for a bit of a pressure release valve. If people feel this way, they need an avenue to be able to express it. So I'm going to watch and see how the petition plays out. We'll know by the end of May if they have enough signatures to go to a vote, and if so, then we'll schedule that probably for the fall.
That seems risky. That seems risky to me, particularly at a time when there are real threats to our sovereignty that are coming from the outside.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if you have the same conversation in Quebec where they're about to elect a Parti Québécois leader. I think it's far more risky.
I ask questions there too.
I think it's far more risky to have this question drag on for years. If this is an acute issue that we're facing because of the last 10 years of being treated so badly by Trudeau, if there is a new government, there's a sort of a recognition of whether or not he's moving in the right direction. I think he's doing many things in the right direction. I think he'll do a lot more with the help of a strong opposition leader. But that, to me, is a demonstration of why there's some urgency. We've got to address the issue of getting the MOU implemented and getting to it and demonstrating that we're going to develop our resources again. And we've got to address some of the big issues like the gun buyback, which is unpopular everywhere except for Quebec. And it's a constant source of irritation.
So again, Danielle Smith does not want to demonize the 1 million Albertans because she doesn't want to acknowledge the fact that there's a difference between somebody who crosses the border to enlist the support of another country and people who are angry. The but she acknowledges that there's a lot of hurt feelings. And I'm not saying that there aren't. And I think that there are political leaders like Danny who have done a very good job of weaponizing those hurt feelings. And her predecessor, Jason Kenney, absolutely did the same. I've said it before and I'll say it again. There was a moment right when Jason Kenney realized that he was going to be facing a leadership confidence vote, where he realized that he had let the inmates into the asylum. I believe that was actually the terms that he used, is that he didn't want to see the inmates running the asylum. And he realized that by flirting with the far right, he had been playing with flames and matches right beside the drapes, and he lit the whole house on fire. Danielle Smith seems to believe that she can use this unconstitutional, illegal referendum question to be a release valve for the separatists and the angry people with the hurt feelings. And she doesn't seem to have any functional awareness of the fact that she's somewhat rebuilt the house. She's made it of cardboard, though, saturated in lighter fluid, and she's running around with a Zippo hoping for the best. And she kept with the script right up until yesterday.
Pierre Poilievre mentioned how his government follows the Constitution. Last year, the judge said the Alberta separation petition was unconstitutional, so all your provincial UCP government did was change Bill 14, I think, to get around the law and to allow a separation petition to go through. Question is, do you agree with Poilievre in following the Constitution? What's the point of having it if all the government has to do is change a bill to appeal or appease a certain crowd?
Well, I guess this is the thing, that the court process goes through 3 different levels, and sometimes lower courts make mistakes that then get corrected at the appeals court, and sometimes appeals courts makes mistakes that get appealed at the Supreme Court level. It takes a long process to be able to decide that. But our view is that it's our job as the provincial government to implement policies in a way that is constitutional. And we don't want to have gatekeepers saying, I like this question so it can go ahead, but I don't like this question so it can't go ahead. And I have to tell you, there was more than one instance where either a judge or the elections officials were blocking petition campaigns. And that's not the point. We want it to be permissive. We want Albertans to be able to convince their peers that an issue is important enough that it should be put to a referendum, and we'll see where it goes. But it is the onus on the provincial government to make sure we're implementing policy in a constitutional way.
Which brings us back to demonizing the courts, because right there at the end, Danny said it. It is the onus of the provincial government to make sure that we're implementing things in a constitutional way. It is the responsibility of the provincial government to make sure that the laws that they enact are implemented or drafted in a constitutional way. It is the job of the courts to determine whether or not the laws that come out of the legislature are in fact constitutional. Danny can't acknowledge that. The courts, it takes so long, and there's all these different levels, and sometimes the courts are just wrong. We don't want to have gatekeepers. If people can get what they need to have a referendum question, then they should be able to have whatever referendum question that they want. It doesn't take a very creative mind to put together a long list of referendum questions that should never be put before Albertans. But according to Danny's logic, if you can meet the minimum standard, then you should be able to say whatever things that you want and have those things put before the electorate en masse. And that gets to be a really dangerous thing. Because if it doesn't have to be constitutional, if you look at the legislation, there's nothing that says that you can't have hate speech in it. The unintended consequences of the blind pursuit of ideology that Danielle Smith has enabled and continues to endorse is staggering. One more clip on this topic.
How many of the promised 1,000 teachers and educational assistants have been hired so far? how much of the announced funding has reached classrooms? And then my follow-up is that you said that you would not demonize or marginalize groups in this province in reference to the Separatists. So is that kind of not what the notwithstanding clause did to teachers? Thank you.
Well, no, it didn't. It got us to a settlement. I mean, remember, governments are responsible for balancing rights, and the right to strike is one that is an important part of the bargaining process, and they did strike. They went on strike for 3 weeks, but we had to look at whether teachers were getting harmed because the union hadn't put aside money to pay for a strike fund, so they were out of pocket on that. They were getting to a point where we wouldn't be covering their health premiums anymore because, again, that had to be covered by the ATA because we didn't have a contract. So there was some real harm being caused to a lot of teachers as a result, but there were also harm being caused to students, and students have a right to learn. So we thought that because we were getting further apart rather than closer together, that was one of the only options that we had available to us because we have two tables. We've got a provincial table, local tables, and we just didn't want rotating strikes on local issues for 61 different boards. So I think we've got some stability to deal with the first part of your question, which is complexity in the classroom. And I think as we've gotten the feedback from our expert panel, as we have our cabinet committee, it's very clear to us that just doing blanket funding on this issue is not going to solve it. We've got to take a more targeted approach. I believe I've got a podium next week with Dimitrios Nicolaides, our education minister, where we talk about exactly how those teams will roll out, where they'll go to, how they'll be composed. And so I'll be able to give you a more precise answer next week.
It is bonkers to me that somebody can go from people have a right to organize. If people want to have a referendum, people should be allowed to have a referendum. People have a right to organize. No, not like that, though. They have that right up until I decide as the final and only arbiter of where those rights start and stop. That's where their rights start and stop. That's a wild statement to make. And again, it goes with the theme. If anybody wants to be concerned about things that are going on, when you have a person who's saying, I am the final and only authority on what your rights are, I'm not a lawyer. I'm going to tell the courts what I want them to do. I wish I could. Oh, wait, maybe if I defund them, I can. It is more bonkers, though, in a different way. To say, I use the notwithstanding clause to rob teachers of their charter rights to save them. That is some textbook level authoritarian bullshit. She used the only mechanism that exists for which there is no legal test. People like to they come up in the comments all the time in the social media posts. I would like to say that our chat group here is lovely. But they come up in the comments. Oh, well, so you were probably really against the COVID restrictions too then. No, there's actually a legal mechanism that was required. They didn't use the notwithstanding clause to suspend charter rights during COVID. They used something called the Oakes test, and they had to articulate that. Now, politicians did a great job, especially in Alberta, of screwing that up. But there is a process. The problems start when politicians believe that they are above the process. There's a couple other pieces I just want to hit on real quick on the Separatist piece, because there are some positive updates that are absolutely worth highlighting. It is, I'm going to use this word a lot, apparently in the 5-minute space. It is bonkers to me that the biggest proponents who are standing up for Confederation so far are the First Nations people. We have seen the Sturgeon Lake Cree Nation have initiated a legal challenge with the supports of all of the treaty nations in Alberta. We saw just this week the Dene Nation, as of February 4th, 2026, issued a statement that they stand firm with Alberta Treaty 6, 7, and 8 against the separatist referendum. The Sturgeon Lake Cree Nation has written to Mark Carney, Chief Sheldon Sunshine. He CC'd a bunch of people in there as well. But I haven't seen anything where Chief Sheldon Sunshine has said, it wasn't me that wrote the letter. So there are good things that are happening. Here's the call to action. And this was actually something that we thought about a bit in putting together tonight's show, is this is some dire shit. That's the reality. Danielle SMith is actively working to undermine the courts. She's trying to get greater control of who gets imported to the courts. She's emboldening separatists. She's serving up a giant bullshit buffet, not as big as Jeff Rath's bullshit buffet, but she's not doing anything to try to stop Jeff Rath's bullshit buffet. She's still serving up her little mini breakfast bullshit buffet, let's call it. All of this stuff is real. All of this stuff is happening. And it's very easy to look at that and go, Jesus, what do I do? Well, tonight, we're going to give you some options. First of all, Sturgeon Lake Cree Nation has started a GoFundMe to help support, because trust me, I know legal stuff ain't cheap. They've started a GoFundMe to help fight back and to push back against the separatist, and to make sure that their court process has legs. If you have the ability to support that, I would strongly encourage you to do so. The fundraiser is organized by Sturgeon Lake Cree Nation and managed through its finance department, so it's all above board. This is not just going to some random thing where somebody's going to try to use it for vacations or junk. It's real. So if you have the ability to support that, strongly encourage you to do so. That's not all. There's lots of other things that you could do. There are going to be, God willing, I'm aware of at least 3 rallies that are pro-Canadian rallies. It is possible to acknowledge the flaws that Canada has, the work that remains to be done, without blowing the whole thing up. It's entirely possible to do that. So if you have a rally in your area, go to one. If you don't have a rally in your area, maybe organize one. The most important thing anybody can be doing is talking to people, because this is the thing. The people who are capable of holding the not experiencing the cognitive dissonance, they're talking to everybody. They're talking to everybody. And so it's incumbent on the 75%, 80% of Albertans who believe in the idea of Canada, the unaccomplished goals of Canada, to step up and start talking to the neighbors and being like, hey, have you heard any of this bullshit that these guys, have you been to the bullshit buffet? Did you notice the bouquet, the smell that was coming off of it? Because I sure did. They're lying about all of these things, and I don't like it. And that guy went down to the States to try to get Alberta to join the States, and then he changed it to a $500 billion line of credit. That's kind of treason-y to me. I don't like that. We have to start having those conversations. But even if you're not comfortable with that, there's still even more things that you can do. Corb Lund's petition is now collecting people who can either you can register to sign, you can register to be a signature collector. You can do all of the things. You can find that information form that's up on the screen up at coalpetition.ca. If you're somebody who values clean drinking water and you want to see coal mining banned on the eastern slopes, which overwhelmingly Albertans do, you got to show up and demonstrate it. So there's lots of different ways to engage. There's lots of different ways to push back. It just requires the choice to do so. So that's the call to action for tonight's show. And I think that's about it's another Lord of the Rings episode. I think maybe we just I'm just going to have to accept that the live episodes are going to be 2 hours and change, because there's so much going on in this province, and we're heading into a new legislative session, and it's all so much. But we're going to be breaking down the segments from the show and putting them up as separate throughout the week, because this is 2 hours and change is a lot to sit through. So I want to say a tremendous thank you to everybody who stuck around tonight. I want to say a big thank you to everybody who is in the chat. I love our little chat group so much. It makes my heart full, and I love reading through them as the last part of the offline process of the weekly show goes up. Excuse me, might have pushed my voice. I'm still recovering from a little bit of the plague. I want to say a big thank you to all of our Patreon supporters. And with that, I'm going to do the plugs. So if we'll start with the merch. We do have a merch store. You can get all of the hoodies, the t-shirts, the hats, all of that. I make no bones about the fact that we sell these things and you can buy them. If you have the disposable income to do so, we partner with Oddities and they do a great job of doing all of the work. Yeah, it's great. I actually almost wore my my long sleeve official AB Ledge hallway monitor. I almost wore it tonight, but I'm not there to step out of the short sleeves yet. Change is hard. But that's not all that you can do to help support the show. If you value the kind of content that we're trying to produce here at The Breakdown, you can sign up to be one of our Patreon supporters at www.patreon.com/TheBreakdownAB, where our Patreon supporters get early access to our interview episodes and the occasional special event. And we did give ticket discounts for the live shows. I forget to mention that. We're going to be doing some more live shows in the new year. Going to start setting those up pretty quick here. So keep an eye out for those as well. And if you're not into the regular monthly commitment, that's okay too. If you want to throw a few bones to the show to help us continue doing the stuff that we do, you can send e-transfers to info@thebreakdownab.ca. And that's how you can give us money. You can buy our stuff and give us money. I do not do this for the money, to be clear. I think it's about it. I feel like there's something I'm forgetting though.
How's your BS detector evolved over time?
I tend to be pretty trusting.
You know what though? I don't. And the bullshit buffet is starting to ripen up the joint, Danny. Thank you all so much. If you're watching on the YouTubes, the like, the subscribe, leave comments as well. I'm told that boosts the algorithm. Share it with your friends. If you have that annoying separatist uncle, send him a link. I'd love to see the comments that he has for this. And thank you all so much. Hopefully back next week for a live show. If not, we'll do something. I'm at the mercy of a schedule that I don't have entirely a lot of control over right now. So we'll do something of some kind, hopefully. But for sure back in 2 weeks for another live show. Trying to set up a couple of interview. I have a couple of interview asks that I'm trying to get in. I'm really excited for them. So I have my fingers crossed. If we get them, you'll see them on Sunday. If we don't, we'll see you in 2 weeks. One last thing. I'm so bad at this. We've started taking for our Substack. We've started taking op-ed submissions. So if you have an op-ed that you are willing to put some time into writing well, and you want to submit it, and you're open to a little bit of dialogue about like, hey, maybe there's some massaging that can be done. We're still trying to get a handle on this. But if you're willing to work collaboratively a little bit with the breakdown and you have an op-ed that you want to submit, we put up one from one of our friends down in Southern Alberta. It went great guns. It was fantastic. So if you have an op-ed, send it our way. And I think that's it for real this time though. Thank you all so much. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and as always, keep the conversation going.